June 4th, 1942, 10:20 hours. 20,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean, 200 miles northwest of Midway Atoll, Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky, 39 years old from Buffalo, New York, led 33 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers from USS Enterprise. They'd been searching for Japanese carriers for over an hour. Fuel gauges showed critical levels. If Japanese fleet wasn't found soon, many aircraft wouldn't have enough fuel to return to Enterprise. Some crews would have to ditch an ocean. Recovery would be uncertain. McClusky scanned horizon through cockpit canopy. Empty ocean, blue water stretching to every horizon. No sign of Japanese fleet. Radio silence prevented communication with Enterprise. McClusky had to decide. Turn back now while fuel allowed safe return, or continue search knowing aircraft would run out of fuel. The decision would determine whether this mission accomplished anything or became futile gesture that cost aircraft and crews. At approximately 1,005 hours, McClusky had made critical decision. When initial search sector showed no Japanese carriers, he'd extended search northwest based on intuition about Japanese course. That decision, continuing beyond assigned sector, gambling fuel reserves, was paying off or about to result in disaster. Either way, commitment was made. Then McClusky saw it. White wake on ocean surface. Japanese destroyer cutting through water at high speed. Destroyers didn't operate alone in open ocean. They screened capital ships. McClusky followed destroyers' wake backward towards origin. At 1,020 hours, he saw them. 4 Japanese aircraft carriers. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the cream of Japanese combined fleet. The carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. The most powerful naval striking force in Pacific. And they were directly below, completely exposed, caught at worst possible moment. This is the story of the Battle of Midway, of the 3 days that tested American determination against Japanese offensive momentum, of the intelligence breakthrough, where Station Hypo Codebreakers identified Japanese target and allowed Admiral Chester Nimitz to position ambush, of June 4th, 1942, when Torpedo Squadron sacrificed themselves drawing Japanese fighters to low altitude, of the 5 minutes from 10:20 to 10:25 hours, when 3 Japanese carriers were hit simultaneously and burned in, mutual destruction, of Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, who led Torpedo Squadron 8 to annihilation, knowing odds were impossible, and of how Japan's offensive capability died in flames on single morning, changing Pacific war forever. By June 1942, Japan had achieved stunning victories across Pacific. Pearl Harbor in December 1941 had crippled American Pacific Fleet's battleship force. Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, Dutch East Indies, all fall into Japanese forces in months. Japanese empire stretched from Burma to Central Pacific Islands. Imperial Japanese Navy dominated Western Pacific. American forces were retreating, desperate, attempting to hold perimeter while building strength for eventual counteroffensive. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of Japanese Combined Fleet, recognized that American industrial capacity would eventually overwhelm Japan. United States could build more ships, more aircraft, more everything than Japan. Time favored America. Therefore, Japan needed decisive victory soon, battle that would destroy remaining American carrier strength and force negotiated peace before American production advantage became insurmountable. Yamamoto's plan was Operation MI, invasion of Midway Atoll. Midway was American outpost 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii. It provided base for American patrol aircraft and submarines. Capturing Midway would extend Japanese defensive perimeter, eliminate American base, and most importantly, lure American carriers into decisive battle. Yamamoto believed American carriers would have to defend Midway. When they appeared, Japanese combined fleet would destroy them. The Japanese force committed to Midway operation was overwhelming. For fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, with 248 aircraft. These weren't random carriers. These were the elite Kido Butai mobile striking force that had attacked Pearl Harbor. Supporting them were battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, invasion transports carrying 5,000 troops. Total Japanese force exceeded 200 ships. Against this, Americans could muster 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown, with approximately 230 aircraft. But Americans had critical advantage Yamamoto didn't know about. Station Hypo, American Signals Intelligence Unit at Pearl Harbor commanded by Commander Joseph Rockefort, had partially broken Japanese Naval Code JN-25. Through months of painstaking cryptanalysis, Rockefort's team could read portions of Japanese communications. By late May 1942, they'd identified that Japanese were planning major operation against target designated AF. Rockefeller believed AF was Midway. Others argued it might be Aleutians or Hawaii or even California. The debate at Pacific Fleet headquarters was intense. Admiral Nimitz, commanding Pacific Fleet, needed certainty before committing his limited carrier force. Rockefeller devised clever deception. He had Midway send uncoded radio message reporting water distillation plant breakdown. Days later, Japanese communication intercepted by station Hypo mentioned that AF was short of fresh water. AF was Midway. Rockefeller was vindicated. With target identified, Nimitz could position his carrier for ambush. Rather than being lured into Japanese trap, Americans would ambush Japanese. The three American carriers, Enterprise and Hornet of Task Force 16 commanded by Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, and Yorktown of Task Force 17 commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, took position northeast of Midway on June 2nd, waiting for Japanese to arrive. Japanese had no idea American carriers were present. Japanese believed they had surprise. Reality was opposite. Yamamoto's operational plan was complex, perhaps overly so. Japanese forces were divided into multiple groups approaching from different directions. Northern force would attack Aleutian Islands as diversion. Main body with battleships, including Yamamoto's flagship Yamato, would follow behind carriers. Invasion force would land troops on Midway after air strikes suppress offenses. Kido Butai, the four carriers, would strike Midway, destroy aircraft and facilities, then engage American carriers when they inevitably appeared. The plan's complexity created vulnerabilities. Forces were separated by hundreds of miles, unable to support each other. Communication between groups was difficult. Most critically, Japanese assumed Americans didn't know about operation. When that assumption proved false, entire plan began unraveling. Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo commanded Kido Butai, the carrier striking force. Nagumo was experienced carrier commander who'd led Pearl Harbor attack. But Nagumo was also cautious, methodical, sometimes indecisive when situations demanded rapid adaptation. At Midway, Nagumo's characteristics would contribute to disaster. Japanese carrier doctrine emphasized strike power. Aircraft were maintained on flight, decks ready for immediate launch. This maximized striking capability but created vulnerability. Aircraft armed with bombs and torpedoes on exposed decks were volatile. Fire control was critical. One spark could trigger catastrophe. Japanese carriers had less robust damage control than American carriers. Internal subdivisions, fire suppression systems, armor protection, all were inferior to American designs. Japanese philosophy emphasized offense. Defense was secondary. The four Japanese carriers represented cream of Imperial Navy. Akagi and Kaga were large converted carriers. Soryu and Hiryu were purpose-built fleet carriers. Together they embarked 248 aircraft, fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers. Crews were experienced, many veterans of Pearl Harbor, Indian Ocean raids, previous operations. Japanese naval aviation was at its peak. Trained, confident, successful, but that success bred overconfidence. Japanese believed themselves superior to Americans in skill, training, equipment, fighting spirit. American forces were contemptible, easily defeated. This overconfidence would prove fatal. Admiral Nimitz's force was quantitatively inferior, but had qualitative advantages. Intelligence breakthrough gave American surprise. Positioning northeast of Midway allowed Americans to strike Japanese first. American carriers were concentrated, while Japanese forces were dispersed. These advantages, properly exploited, could offset Japanese numerical superiority. USS Enterprise and USS Hornet formed Task Force 16. Enterprise was a veteran carrier that had participated in Doolittle Raid against Tokyo in April. Her air group was experienced. Hornet was newer, her air group less experienced but eager. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance commanded Task Force 16. Spruance was cruiser admiral, not aviator, but he was intelligent, aggressive when necessary, cautious when appropriate. His judgment would prove excellent throughout battle. USS Yorktown formed Task Force 17 commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, overall tactical commander at Midway. Yorktown had been damaged at Battle of Coral Sea in May. Shipyard estimated 3 months repair time. Nimitz demanded Yorktown ready in 3 days. Pearl Harbor shipyard workers performed miracle. Yorktown sailed to Midway with temporary repairs, damaged but operational. Her presence gave Americans 3 carriers instead of 2, critical advantage. American carrier doctrine emphasized balanced approach. Strike power was important, but so was defense. American carriers had better damage control than Japanese, improved subdivisions, fire suppression, armor over magazines, and machinery. American doctrine emphasized protecting carriers while striking enemy. This defensive emphasis would prove valuable. American aircraft at Midway were mixed quality. Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber was excellent. Accurate, reliable, capable. Douglas TBD Devastator torpedo bomber was obsolete, slow, inadequate defensive armament, vulnerable. Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter was outclassed by Japanese Zero in maneuverability, but more rugged, better armed. American crews were less experienced than Japanese, but motivated, aware stakes were high. Midway Atoll itself contributed to American defense. Marine aircraft based on Midway, fighters, dive bombers, torpedo bombers, patrol aircraft, would strike Japanese carriers during approach. Army Air Force B-17 bombers based on Midway would conduct high-altitude attacks. Navy PBY Catalina patrol aircraft would locate Japanese fleet and provide reconnaissance. Midway's aircraft wouldn't win battle alone, but they would attrite Japanese strength and provide intelligence. At 0430 hours on June 4th, Nagumo launched first strike against Midway, 108 aircraft, roughly half its available strength. The remaining aircraft were held in reserve, armed with torpedoes for anti-ship strikes in case American carriers appeared. This division of forces, half striking land target, half ready for naval combat, was reasonable given Japanese assumptions. But assumptions were wrong. American carriers were already present, already launching strikes. Japanese strike arrived over Midway at approximately 0630 hours. Marine fighters rose to intercept. The combat was one-sided. Marine F-2A Brewster Buffaloes and F-4F Wildcats were outnumbered and outclassed by Japanese Zeros. Marines fought bravely but suffered heavy casualties. Japanese bombers struck Midway installations. Damage was significant but not devastating. Runways remained operational. Facilities were damaged but functional. Most critically, Midway's aircraft had launched before Japanese arrived. American aircraft weren't caught on ground. At approximately 0700 hours, Japanese strike leader radioed Nagumo, "There is need for second attack wave." Midway wasn't suppressed. Another strike was necessary before invasion could proceed. Nagumo faced decision. His reserve aircraft were armed with torpedoes for anti-ship work. If he committed them to second Midway strike, they'd need to be rearmed with land attack bombs. Rearming would take time. During that time, carriers would be vulnerable. But if Midway wasn't suppressed, invasion couldn't proceed. At 0715 hours, Nagumo ordered reserve aircraft rearmed for second Midway strike. Torpedoes were removed from aircraft. Bombs were brought up from magazines. Ordnance crews worked frantically on hangar decks and flight decks. This rearming process, removing torpedoes, bringing up bombs, attaching bombs to aircraft, was exactly what Nagumo's carriers would be doing when American dive bombers arrived. Meanwhile, American strikes from Midway were attacking Japanese carriers. Marine dive bombers, Army B-17s, Navy torpedo bombers from Midway, all attacked between 0700 and 0820 hours. None scored hits. Japanese combat air patrol, Zeros flying cover over carriers, shot down many attackers. Japanese shipboard anti-aircraft fire was effective, but these attacks disrupted Japanese operations, forced evasive maneuvers, kept Zeros busy at low altitude. Most importantly, they convinced Nagumo that threat was from Midway, not from American carriers. At 0728 hours, Japanese scout aircraft reported sighting American ships. This report should have alarmed Nagumo. American ships northeast of Midway suggested carrier presence, but initial report didn't specify ship types. Nagumo assumed they were cruisers or destroyers, not carriers. He continued rearming aircraft for Midway's strike. At 0809 hours, scout aircraft clarified, enemy force accompanied by carrier. Now situation was clear. American carrier was present. Nagumo's worst scenario, divided attention between Midway and enemy carriers, was reality. His aircraft were configured wrong. Reserve strike was armed with land attack bombs, needed anti-ship torpedoes. First strike returning from Midway, needed to land, rearm, refuel. Carriers' decks were cluttered with aircraft being rearmed. Zeros were at low altitude after intercepting Midway strikes, needing time to regain altitude. Everything was wrong. Nagumo made critical decision. Recover first strike from Midway. Rearm all aircraft with torpedoes for anti-ship work. Then launch coordinated strike against American carrier. This decision prioritized organization and coordination over immediate action. It was reasonable given Japanese doctrine emphasizing mass-coordinated strikes. But it meant Japanese carriers would spend next hour recovering, rearming, refueling aircraft, precisely when they were most vulnerable. American carriers began launching strikes at approximately 0700 hours. Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown each launched air groups consisting of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo bombers. Coordination was poor. Units became separated. Fighter escorts lost contact with bombers. Squadrons approached Japanese carriers independently rather than in coordinated attack. This lack of coordination should have been disaster. Instead, it accidentally created advantage. Lieutenant Commander John Waldron commanded Torpedo Squadron 8 VT-8 from USS Hornet. Waldron was 41 years old, part Sioux Indian, intense and determined. He'd trained his squadron relentlessly. He believed torpedo attack on carriers required getting close, very close. Despite defensive fire, Waldron had studied Japanese tactics at Pearl Harbor, knew what his squadron faced. On morning of June 4th, before launching, Waldron briefed his crews. He told them mission would be dangerous. Casualties would be heavy, but they would press home attacks regardless of cost. They would not turn back. VT-8 consisted of 15 TBD Devastator torpedo bombers. Devastators were obsolete. Maximum speed 115 miles per hour, loaded with torpedo, slow climb rate, minimal defensive armament. Against Japanese Zeros and shipboard anti-aircraft fire, Devastators were death traps. Everyone knew it. They flew anyway. At approximately 0918 hours, VT-8 found Japanese carriers. No fighter escort. Waldron's fighters had become separated during flight. VT-8 was alone. Waldron didn't wait for fighters. He led squadron into attack. Zeros from Japanese Combat Air Patrol dove on Devastators. The slow American torpedo bombers couldn't evade. Zeros shot down Devastators systematically. Anti-aircraft fire from Japanese carriers added carnage. Devastators burst into flames, crashed into ocean, exploded. Waldron's aircraft was hit early. He continued leading squadron until his Devastator crashed into sea. Waldron died in crash. One by one, Devastators of VT-8 were destroyed. 15 aircraft attacked. One survived, Ensign George Gay. Gay's aircraft was shot down after launching torpedo. He survived crash, spent hours floating in ocean amid battle, watched from water as events unfolded. His torpedo missed. All torpedoes launched by VT-8 missed or malfunctioned. 14 of 15 aircraft were destroyed. 29 of 30 crewmen killed. VT-8 accomplished nothing measurable. No hits, no damage to Japanese carriers. The sacrifice appeared futile. But VT-8's attack had critical effect. Japanese Zeros were drawn to low-altitude intercepting torpedo bombers. Japanese carriers maneuvered evasively, disrupting deck operations. Japanese attention focused on immediate threat at wavetop level. When American dive bombers arrived minutes later at 20,000 feet, Japanese defenses were completely unready. VT-8's sacrifice wasn't futile. It enabled victory. But none of Waldron's men knew it. They died believing mission failed. Enterprise Torpedo Squadron 6 VT-6 and Yorktown Torpedo Squadron 3 VT-3 attacked shortly after VT-8. Both squadrons suffered similar fates. VT-6 lost 10 of 14 aircraft. VT-3 lost 10 of 12 aircraft. Combined American torpedo squadrons. 41 aircraft attacked, 35 destroyed, 80% casualties. Not one torpedo hit. By conventional measures, torpedo attacks were catastrophic failures. But those attacks drew Japanese defenses low, disrupted carrier operations, and set conditions for dive bomber success. While torpedo squadrons were being destroyed, Enterprise dive bombers under Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky were searching for Japanese carriers. McClusky had launched from Enterprise at approximately 0700 hours, leading Bombing Squadron 6 and Scouting Squadron 6, 33 SBD Dauntless dive bombers total. McClusky's navigation was precise, but Japanese position had changed. Nagumo's carriers had maneuvered to launch and recover aircraft, alter course to evade Midway strikes. When McClusky reached expected Japanese position at approximately 0920 hours, he found empty ocean. Japanese carriers weren't where they should be. McClusky faced critical decision: return to Enterprise while fuel allowed safe recovery, or continue searching. Continuing meant some aircraft might run out of fuel before reaching Enterprise. Crews might have to ditch at sea. Recovery would be uncertain. But returning without finding Japanese meant wasting opportunity, possibly losing battle. McClusky decided to continue searching. McClusky's extended search was based on tactical reasoning. If Japanese had advanced toward Midway as expected, but weren't in a predicted position, they must have altered course. Most likely explanation was launching and recovering aircraft, which required heading into wind. McClusky calculated probable Japanese course and headed northwest. This decision, continuing search based on tactical intuition rather than returning to Enterprise, was gamble with fuel and lives. It was also correct. At approximately 1,005 hours, McClusky spotted Japanese destroyer cutting through water at high speed. He followed destroyer's wake. At 1,020 hours, he saw them. 4 Japanese carriers in box formation. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Flight decks crowded with aircraft. Zeros at low altitude after intercepting torpedo bombers. Perfect target. McClusky didn't hesitate. He led dive bombers into attack. At exactly 1,020 hours on June 4th, 1942, 3 things happened simultaneously that changed Pacific War. McClusky's Enterprise dive bombers arrived over Japanese carriers. Yorktown dive bombers under Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie arrived over same carriers from different direction. And Japanese carriers were at absolute worst possible moment, recovering aircraft for Midway strike, rearming aircraft for anti-ship strike. Zeros at low altitude unable to intercept, decks crowded with aircraft and ordnance. McClusky assessed situation instantly. For carriers below, his 33 dive bombers needed to hit multiple carriers to maximize damage. He ordered Bombing Squadron 6 to attack Kaga. He led Scouting Squadron 6 against Akagi. The dive bombers rolled into attack. Negative G maneuver that pitched aircraft into 70-degree dive. SBD Dauntless dive bombers dove from 20,000 feet. Terminal velocity exceeded 250 miles per hour. Pilots aimed through telescopic sight. Altimeters unwound rapidly. Japanese anti-aircraft fire was ineffective. Gunners couldn't track diving aircraft accurately. Zeros were at low altitude, unable to climb fast enough to intercept. Japanese carriers tried evasive maneuvers, but couldn't avoid bombs falling from directly overhead. At 1,022 hours, bombs began hitting. Kaga was struck by 4 bombs in rapid succession. 1 hit aft, penetrating flight deck into hangar. 1 hit amidships. 1 hit forward among aircraft preparing to launch. Explosions ignited aviation fuel, detonated ordnance stored on deck and in hangar. Secondary explosions followed. Aircraft exploded. Torpedo warheads detonated. Bombs stored on deck cooked off. Kaga erupted in flames. Simultaneously, Akagi was hit. 3 bombs struck flagship carrier. 1 bomb hit aft flight deck, penetrating the hangar. 2nd bomb hit amidships, detonating among aircraft armed with torpedoes. 3rd bomb hit forward. The explosions on Akagi were catastrophic. Aviation fuel sprayed across hangar deck, ignited in fireball. Torpedoes stored on deck detonated. Bombs being loaded on aircraft exploded. Akagi's hangar became inferno. Yorktown dive bombers attacked Soryu. 3 bombs hit within minutes. Soryu's flight deck erupted. Aircraft armed and fueling exploded. Fire spread rapidly. Crew fought to control damage, but explosions continued as ordnance cooked off. From 10:20 to 10:25 hours, 5 minutes, 3 Japanese carriers were mortally wounded. Kaga burning uncontrollably. Akagi aflame, Admiral Nagumo forced to transfer flag to cruiser. Soryu erupting in secondary explosions. 3 of 4 Japanese carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor were dying. Not from hours of sustained attack. Not from overwhelming American numerical superiority. From 5 minutes of perfect execution at perfect moment. The 4th carrier, Hiryu, was separated from other 3 by several miles. American dive bombers didn't see her initially. Hiryu escaped immediate disaster. But 3 carriers burning simultaneously created shock that would determine battle outcome. Japanese damage control proved inadequate. American carriers had robust damage control doctrine. Trained teams, effective equipment, subdivision to contain fires, priority on saving ship. Japanese carriers emphasized offense, gave less attention to damage control. At Midway, this became fatal. Kaga burned furiously. Fires spread through hangar deck. Explosions continued as ordnance detonated. Crew fought fires but lacked effective equipment and training. Captain ordered abandoned ship at approximately 1,640 hours. Kaga sank at 1925 hours. Over 800 crew killed. Akagi suffered similar fate. Admiral Nagumo transferred his flag to cruiser Nagara at approximately 1,046 hours. Remaining crew fought fires, but damage was overwhelming. Secondary explosions prevented effective firefighting. Akagi was abandoned during night. Japanese destroyer torpedoed Akagi at dawn June 5th to prevent capture. Approximately 270 crew killed. Soryu burned uncontrollably. Explosions ripped through carrier at frequent intervals. Captain ordered abandoned ship at 1,045 hours. Soryu sank at 1913 hours. Approximately 720 crew killed. The speed with which 3 carriers were lost shocked Japanese. At 1,020 hours, Kido Butai possessed 4 operational carriers with 248 aircraft. By 1,100 hours, 3 carriers were burning wrecks, aircraft destroyed, crews abandoning ship. Japanese striking power evaporated in minutes. Psychological impact was severe. Japanese naval aviators believed themselves invincible. Reality proved different. Hiryu, the 4th Japanese carrier, had escaped morning disaster through fortunate positioning. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi commanded 2nd Carrier Division, including Hiryu. Yamaguchi was aggressive, determined commander. When he learned 3 carriers were burning, he immediately launched counterattack with available aircraft. At approximately 1,100 hours, Hiryu launched 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters, all available strike aircraft. Target was American carriers that had devastated Kido Butai. Japanese crews were veteran aviators seeking revenge for Akagi, Kaga, Soryu. At approximately 1,205 hours, Japanese strike found Yorktown. American combat air patrol intercepted attackers. F-4F Wildcat shot down several Japanese aircraft, but couldn't stop all. Japanese dive bombers pushed through and attacked Yorktown. 3 bombs hit Yorktown. First bomb penetrated flight deck and exploded on hangar deck, starting fires. Second bomb penetrated the lower decks, exploding in ship's uptakes, snuffing boiler fires. Yorktown lost power. Third bomb hit among aircraft on flight deck, starting additional fires. Yorktown began listing dead in water, fires burning. But Yorktown didn't die. American damage control teams fought fires, contained flooding, restored power to some boilers. By 1,400 hours, Yorktown was steaming at 20 knots, fires controlled. Repairs seemed successful. Yorktown might survive. At 1,331 hours, Hiryu launched second strike, 10 torpedo bombers and 6 fighters. This attack arrived at Yorktown at approximately 1,430 hours. Again, American fighters intercepted. Again, some Japanese aircraft penetrated defenses. 2 torpedoes hit Yorktown's port side. Flooding was severe. Yorktown lost power again. Lists increased dramatically. Captain feared ship might capsize and ordered abandoned ship at approximately 1,500 hours. Yorktown remained afloat, but helpless. She would be taken under tow, but Japanese submarine I-168 torpedoed her on June 6. Yorktown finally sank June 7th. Approximately 140 crew killed in battle and sinking. Hiryu's strike showed Japanese determination and skill. Despite catastrophic losses to Kido Butai, Japanese aviators continued attacking. They damaged and eventually sank 1 American carrier. But Hiryu's strikes couldn't change strategic outcome. Japan lost 4 carriers. America lost 1. Math favored America. While Hiryu's aircraft were attacking Yorktown, American search aircraft located Hiryu. Enterprise and Hornet prepared strikes to destroy Japan's remaining carrier. At approximately 1,530 hours, 24 Enterprise dive bombers launched. They found Hiryu at approximately 1,700 hours and attacked immediately. 4 bombs hit Hiryu. Flight deck erupted. Fires spread through ship. Hiryu's hangar deck exploded as fueled and armed aircraft detonated. Admiral Yamaguchi remained aboard. He refused evacuation, choosing to die with his ship. Hiryu burned through night. At 0230 hours June 5th, Japanese destroyers torpedoed Hiryu to prevent capture. She sank at approximately 0900 hours. Over 400 crew killed. With Hiryu's sinking, Japanese carrier force was annihilated. All 4 carriers of Kido Butai, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, sunk in 1 day. Japan lost 248 carrier aircraft. More critically, Japan lost experienced pilots and aircrew who couldn't be easily replaced. American carrier pilot training program was extensive, producing qualified replacements. Japanese training was shorter, more selective, difficult to expand. Pilot losses at Midway were irreplaceable. American casualties at Midway were significant but sustainable. USS Yorktown sunk. Destroyer USS Hammond sunk by same submarine attack that doomed Yorktown. 145 aircraft lost, mostly torpedo bombers but also fighters and dive bombers. 307 American personnel killed. These losses hurt, but didn't cripple American Pacific capability. 2 carriers, Enterprise and Hornet, remained operational. More carriers were under construction. Japanese casualties were catastrophic and irreplaceable. 4 fleet carriers sunk. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. Heavy cruiser Mikuma sunk by air attacks June 6. 248 carrier aircraft lost. Over 3,000 personnel killed, including experienced pilots, air crew, maintenance crews. These losses crippled Japanese offensive capability. Carriers couldn't be quickly replaced. Construction time measured in years. Experienced personnel couldn't be replaced. Training programs couldn't produce equivalent crews quickly. Japanese combined fleet never recovered offensive strength. The strategic disparity was mathematical. Japan entered war with 6 large fleet carriers. By June 7, 1942, 4 were sunk. Japan had 2 remaining, Shokaku and Zuikaku, both damaged at Coral Sea in May. Japan's construction program would add few additional carriers during war. America had 7 fleet carriers in 1942. More were under construction. Essex-class program will produce 17 additional fleet carriers by war's end. Japanese couldn't match American production. Midway's carrier losses meant Japan couldn't win war of attrition. Midway failure resulted from multiple Japanese mistakes compounded by American advantages. Intelligence failure was fundamental. Japanese didn't know Americans had broken their code. They didn't know American carriers were positioned northeast of Midway. They didn't know ambush awaited. Operational security was inadequate. Radio transmissions were intercepted and decoded. Japanese assumed their communications were secure. Assumption was wrong. Divided forces proved fatal. Japanese fleet was separated into multiple groups, unable to support each other. Yamamoto's main body with battleships was hundreds of miles behind carriers, unable to assist when disaster struck. Aleutian attack diverted forces that could have strengthened Midway operation. Concentration of force, fundamental military principle, was violated. Tactical decisions at critical moments were poor. Nagumo's decision to rearm aircraft for second Midway strike left carriers vulnerable. His decision to recover Midway strike before launching anti-ship strike prioritized organization over speed. These decisions were defensible given Japanese doctrine, but proved wrong given actual situation. Doctrine that emphasized mass-coordinated strikes became liability when flexibility was required. Overconfidence affected Japanese planning. Intelligence suggested American carriers might be present, but Japanese discounted possibility. When scout aircraft reported American ships, Japanese assumed cruisers, not carriers. When carrier presence was confirmed, Japanese believed they could handle one carrier easily. Underestimating opponents proved catastrophic. Luck played role. McClusky's decision to extend search paid off. His spotting a destroyer wake led to finding carriers. Yorktown dive bombers arriving simultaneously with Enterprise bombers wasn't planned coordination. It was fortunate coincidence that overwhelmed Japanese defenses. Japanese scout aircraft that could have provided earlier warning of American carriers had mechanical problems delaying launch. Small factors accumulated into American advantage. American intelligence breakthrough was decisive. Station Hypo's partial decryption of JN 25 code allowed Americans to predict Japanese operation. Commander Rockefeller's team worked exhausting hours reading Japanese transmissions. Their conclusions that Japanese would attack Midway on June 4th were precise enough for Nimitz to position carriers perfectly. Intelligence gave Americans gift of surprise. Japanese believed they had surprise. Reality was reversed. American tactical flexibility compensated for uncoordinated attacks. Japanese doctrine emphasized mass-coordinated strikes, all aircraft attacking simultaneously from optimal positions. When circumstances prevented coordination, Japanese struggled to adapt. American doctrine was less rigid. Independent squadron attacks, though wasteful in torpedo bomber casualties, accidentally created advantage by disrupting Japanese timing and positioning defenses incorrectly. American aircraft quality varied, but dive bombers were excellent. SBD Dauntless was accurate, reliable platform. Pilots were well-trained in dive bombing technique. Combination of good aircraft and good training produced results. Japanese horizontal bombers couldn't match dive bomber accuracy. American dive bombers could hit moving ship at sea, difficult task requiring skill and proper equipment. American damage control was superior. Yorktown survived 3 bomb hits and 2 torpedo hits, remaining afloat for days. Japanese carriers couldn't survive equivalent damage. American subdivision, fire suppression, trained damage control parties all contribute to resilience. Japanese carriers burned quickly. Crews abandoned ship. Losses were total. Survivability matters in sustained campaign. Most critically, American industrial capacity guaranteed victory in long war. Midway didn't end war. Fighting continued 3 more years. But Midway ensured American industrial advantage would eventually prevail. Japan couldn't replace carriers fast enough. America could. Mathematical inevitability favored America after Midway. Battle of Midway was strategic turning point in Pacific War. Before Midway, Japan held initiative. Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor, Philippines, Malaya, Dutch East Indies, Burma. America defended desperately, attempted to slow Japanese expansion while building strength. After Midway, strategic dynamic reversed. Japan became defensive. America became offensive. Initiative passed to America permanently. Japan's offensive capability died at Midway. For carriers and experienced aircrew couldn't be replaced. Subsequent Japanese operations were reactive, responding to American moves, defending territory, attempting to attract American forces. Japan launched no more major offensives after Midway. Guadalcanal campaign beginning August 1942 was American offensive. Japanese defended. Philippines, Marianas. Okinawa, all American offensives against Japanese defenses. Strategic initiative never returned to Japan. American confidence grew after Midway. Victory demonstrated Japanese weren't invincible. American forces could win decisive battles. Intelligence, determination, and courage could overcome Japanese advantages. This psychological shift affected every subsequent operation. American forces believed they could win. Japanese forces knew they might lose. Morale matters in prolonged conflict. Midway influenced Japanese strategic planning. After Midway, Japanese strategy became increasingly desperate. Operation Igo in April 1943 attempted to attract American air power through fighter sweeps. Failed. Operation Igo in June 1944 attempted to destroy American carriers in Philippine Sea. Failed catastrophically. Tengo operation at Okinawa in April 1945 sent battleship Yamamoto on one-way suicide mission. Sunk by aircraft. Japanese strategy after Midway consisted of defensive battles, attrition attempts, eventually kamikaze attacks. None succeeded in changing strategic outcome. American strategy after Midway became methodical advance. Island-hopping campaigns seized key positions, bypassed others, slowly advanced toward Japan. Each operation built on previous success. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Marshalls, Marianas, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, steady progression toward Japanese home islands. Midway made this progression possible by destroying Japanese carrier strength that could have interfered with amphibious operations. American survivors of Midway became heroes. Those who survived torpedo squadron attacks. Ensign George Gay of VT-8, few others from VT-6 and VT-3, received recognition for courage under impossible odds. Their sacrifice drawing Japanese defenses low enabled dive bomber success. Survivors carried guilt about lost comrades mixed with pride and contribution to victory. Wade McClusky received Navy Cross for leadership and decision to extend search. His judgment finding Japanese carriers determined battle outcome. McClusky continued serving, retired as Rear Admiral. His decision at 1005 hours June 4th. Continued searching despite fuel concerns. Remained a defining moment of his career. Enterprise and Hornet Air Group personnel who survived became nucleus for training replacement crews. Their combat experience was valuable in preparing new pilots for carrier operations. Many survivors participated in subsequent Pacific battles, Guadalcanal, Santa Cruz, Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf. Midway veterans formed elite cadre within naval aviation community. Yorktown survivors mourned ships lost, but took pride in damage control efforts that kept ship afloat through multiple attacks. Yorktown's resilience demonstrated American carrier toughness. Many survivors transferred to other carriers, continuing fight across Pacific. Japanese survivors were fewer. Many pilots and aircrew died at Midway. Those who survived faced difficult psychological adjustment. Japanese culture emphasized victory and superiority. Defeat at Midway contradicted cultural expectations. Survivors struggled with failure, loss of comrades, knowledge that invincibility myth was shattered. Some survivors participated in subsequent battles. Few survived entire war. Japanese military and public initially didn't know extent of Midway defeat. News was suppressed. Official announcements claimed victory, admitted minimal losses. Public remained ignorant of catastrophe. Military leadership knew truth, but suppressed information to maintain morale. Deception extended within military. Many personnel were informed of carrier losses. Disinformation control prevented panic, but also prevented realistic planning based on actual situation. Admiral Yamamoto bore responsibility for Midway failure. His plan divided forces, underestimated Americans, failed to achieve objectives. Yamamoto offered resignation. It was refused. Japanese Navy needed experienced leadership despite defeat. Yamamoto continued commanding combined fleet until April 1943, when his aircraft was intercepted and shot down by American fighters. Another intelligence victory resulting from decoded Japanese communications revealing Yamamoto's itinerary. Japanese carrier doctrine evolved after Midway. Emphasis on offense moderated. Damage control improved. Training programs expanded, attempting to replace lost pilots. But improvements came too late. American production and pilot training outpaced Japanese efforts. By 1944, Japanese naval aviation was shadow of 1942 strength. Inexperienced pilots flew obsolete aircraft against American superiority. Battle of Philippine Sea in June 1944, called Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, demonstrated Gulf capability. American fighters destroyed 600 Japanese aircraft in one day. Japanese strategic response to Midway was gradual defensive contraction. Perimeter established in early 1942 couldn't be maintained. American offensives beginning Guadalcanal, August 1942 forced Japanese to commit forces defending territory. Each defensive battle attrited Japanese strength. Replacements were inadequate. By 1945, Japan held only home islands and some mainland Asian territory. Pacific Empire was lost. Midway began process. American military and public celebrated Midway victory. After 6 months of defeats and retreats, victory was psychologically important. Americans could win. Japan could be defeated. Morale improved across military and home front. War bond sales increased. Factory workers increased production. Midway demonstrated war was winnable. Sacrifices were worthwhile. Admiral Nimitz's reputation grew. His trust in Rockefeller's intelligence, his positioning of carriers based on decoded information, his tactical decisions, all validated. Nimitz became one of the most respected American commanders. His methodical island-hopping strategy guided Pacific Campaign to victory. Midway was first major success demonstrating his judgment. American industrial response to Midway was acceleration of production. Essex-class carrier program expanded. More carriers, more aircraft, more pilots, more everything. American advantage was industrial capacity. Midway proved that capacity could produce victory if properly applied. War became industrial contest. America won that contest decisively. American tactical doctrine evolved based on Midway lessons. Importance of intelligence was recognized. Signals intelligence became priority. Code-breaking efforts expanded. Subsequent battles benefited from decoded Japanese communications. Importance of air superiority was emphasized. Carriers were recognized as decisive weapons. Battleships, while still useful, were secondary to carriers. American naval doctrine reoriented around carrier aviation. Coordination between carriers improved. The independent attacks at Midway succeeded despite poor coordination, not because of it. Subsequent doctrine emphasized synchronized strikes. Training improved coordination. By 1944, American carrier task forces executed complex coordinated operations smoothly. The learning that began after Midway produced increasingly effective carrier operations. Midway can be compared to other decisive naval battles to understand its unique character. Battle of Trafalgar, 1805, decided naval supremacy in Napoleonic Wars. British fleet under Nelson defeated Franco-Spanish fleet, establishing British naval dominance for century. Midway similarities. Decisive single-day battle. Smaller force defeating larger force through superior tactics and leadership. Long-term strategic implications. Battle of Tsushima, 1905, decided Russo-Japanese War. Japanese fleet under Togo destroyed Russian Baltic fleet. Victory established Japan as naval power. Midway irony. Japan suffered at Midway what Russia suffered at Tsushima, naval catastrophe, destroying offensive capability. Battle of Jutland 1916 was the largest battleship engagement in history. British and German dreadnoughts fought in decisive battle. Neither side won decisively. Strategic outcome favored Britain. German high seas fleet never again challenged British seriously. Midway contrast. Midway was decisive, not indecisive. Japanese carrier fleet was destroyed, not merely damaged. Battle of Coral Sea, May 1942, was first carrier battle, fought month before Midway. Both sides lost one carrier. Battle was tactical draw, but strategic American victory. Japanese invasion of Port Moresby was turned back. Coral Sea was prelude to Midway, demonstrating carrier warfare tactics but not decisive like Midway. Midway's uniqueness was compressed decisiveness. 5 minutes from 10:20 to 10:25 hours determined outcome. 3 carriers destroyed simultaneously. No other naval battle matched this compression. Most battles unfolded over hours or days. Midway's critical moment was 5 minutes. This compression made Midway dramatic and decisive in ways other battles weren't. Battle of Midway is commemorated extensively. Midway Atoll itself is memorial, now part of Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, protected area preserving battle site. Visitors can see where critical events occurred. Memorial plaques honor those who fought. Wreckage of aircraft and ships remains underwater. Protected sites. USS Midway Museum in San Diego honors aircraft carrier named after battle. Museum includes exhibits about Battle of Midway, artifacts, aircraft. Educational programs teach new generations about battle's importance. Annual commemorations bring together veterans, families, historians. Torpedo Squadron 8 Memorial in Pensacola, Florida honors John Waldron and VT, 8 crews who died attacking Japanese carriers. Memorial recognizes sacrifice that enabled victory. VD-8's courage became symbol of naval aviation determination. Multiple books and films documented Battle of Midway. Walter Lord's incredible victory and Gordon Prang's miracle at Midway are definitive histories. Films including 1976 Midway and 2019 Midway brought battle to popular attention. These cultural artifacts ensured Midway remained in American consciousness as turning point. Annual June 4th commemorations occur at Pearl Harbor, San Diego, Pensacola, other naval installations. Veterans participate when able. As veteran population declined, families and military personnel maintain tradition. Midway's importance to Pacific War victory ensures battle will be remembered. Japanese never expected 3 carriers sunk in 5 minutes because conventional wisdom suggested such catastrophic losses required sustained attack over hours or days. Japanese carriers were powerful, well-defended, crewed by experienced personnel. The expectation that American forces could destroy 3 carriers simultaneously in minutes defied probability. But combination of factors, intelligence breakthrough, torpedo squadrons drawing defenses low, dive bombers arriving at perfect moment, Japanese carriers caught rearming aircraft, created conditions for unprecedented disaster. The result changed Pacific War permanently. Japan lost offensive capability. For carriers sunk meant Japan couldn't project power. America gained initiative. Subsequent operations, Guadalcanal, Marshalls, Marianas, Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, were American offensives against Japanese defenses. Japan never recovered strategic position, lost at Midway. From June 3rd to 7th, 1942, from intelligence breakthrough identified Japanese target to 5 minutes when 3 carriers burned to Hiryu's sinking completing carrier destruction. Battle of Midway demonstrated that intelligence, courage, and timing could overcome numerical inferiority and produce decisive victory. 800 torpedo bombers sacrificed drawing Japanese defenses low. 33 dive bombers arrived exact right moment. 5 minutes 1020 to 1025 hours, 3 Japanese carriers hit simultaneously, burned, sank. For carriers lost, Japan never recovered. Intelligence breakthrough enabled perfect ambush. Torpedo sacrifice enabled dive bomber success. Individual decisions determine strategic outcomes. The battle where Codebreakers defeated surprise and timing defeated numbers. The operation where American determination overcame Japanese advantages. The 5 minutes from 10:20 to 10:25 hours that sank 3 carriers and changed Pacific War. The day when Japan's offensive died in flames and America's advance began. Battle of Midway, where Japanese never expected intelligence to reveal their plans. Where 3 carriers sunk in 5 minutes demonstrated vulnerability of power without adaptability. Where turning point arrived compressed into minutes that determined years.